Welcome back to Freaky Recap today. I will be explaining the movie Donnie Darko. Warning, spoilers ahead. A teenager named Donnie Darko lives in suburban Maryland. He has schizophrenia and a history of violence. Not long ago, he stopped taking his schizophrenia medication. Consequently, he is now sleepwalking. His parents, Eddie and Rose, and his sisters, Samantha and Elizabeth, are worried about him. On October 2nd, 1988, Donnie, after sleepwalking, wakes up in the middle of the road. He is confused and does not understand what has happened, but then he smiles. Donnie rides his bicycle back home. At home, his family is spending their day as usual, despite the fact Donnie was out all night. In the evening, they all have dinner. Eddie and Elizabeth are talking about politics, which prompts Rose to recommend Elizabeth go to Harvard next fall. Donnie makes an awkward joke to his sister Samantha that leads to a quarrel between Donnie and Elizabeth. That evening, Rose tells Donnie she knows he has been out all night. Donnie starts acting defensive and tells Rose that maybe she should take his medication instead of him. Rose leaves his room and discusses his behavior with Eddie. Eddie cannot fall asleep, so he watches TV in the living room. Donnie is upstairs in his room. He was woken up by a strange voice, which makes him sleepwalk out of his room. In the living room, Donnie passes by Eddie, but he is asleep in his chair. The strange voice calls Donnie to go outside in the dark. The voice takes Donnie to the golf course, and he smiles at the creature in front of him. A creature is a person wearing a rabbit costume. The rabbit tells Donnie the world will end in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 12 seconds. Elizabeth returns home after going out. Suddenly, something very loud and heavy smashes the house. Everyone wakes up. The next morning, Donnie wakes up on the golf course. He finds a felt pen in his hand and numbers written on his arm: 28, 6, 42, and 12. He starts walking home and notices police officers in front of his house. A jet engine has fallen in his bedroom, and it is being removed. The FAA provides the family free accommodation and offers to pay for the repairs of the house in exchange for the confidentiality agreement. Donnie finds out that FAA has no idea where the jet engine came from. The family is in the hotel. Samantha is asking questions about what had happened. Donnie and Elizabeth ignore her questions. In the other room, their parents are talking about a high school classmate who had a paranoid episode on the way to prom night. Eddie is worried because he has a hunch Donnie will end up the same way. The next day, Donnie and Samantha meet their friends in front of the school: Sean, Ronald, Joni, and Charita. Ronald is mocking Charita, but Donnie defends her. In English class, the teacher, Karen Pomeroy, is talking about The Destructors by Graham Greene. Mrs. Pomeroy asks Donnie his opinion about the book. Donnie answers he thinks destruction is a form of creation, and the characters of the book want to see the world destroyed so that change can take place. At that moment, the classroom enters a new girl, Gretchen Ross. Mrs. Pomeroy provokes Gretchen to sit next to the most attractive boy in the classroom, and she sits next to Donnie. Eddie drives Donnie to his psychiatrist, Dr. Thurman. Eddie comments on how FAA withholds information about what happened to their house. While driving the car, Eddie almost hits a woman on the road. Donnie tries to help the woman and she whispers something to him. At Dr. Thurman's office, Donnie tells the story of a man in a rabbit costume, whose name is Frank. Donnie says Frank told him that the world will end, but he does not believe Frank. The next day in school, Donnie's class is watching a video on how to overcome your fear, hosted by Jim Cunningham. Just then, Donnie hears Frank's voice, telling him to pay attention to the video. That night, Donnie falls asleep on the couch. He dreams the school is in the water. Donnie wakes up and sees Frank in front of him. Donnie is under Frank's influence and leaves the house with an axe in his hand. He approaches the building and breaks the water pipe with the axe. The next morning, Donnie and his classmates are waiting for the bus to school. Sean says the bus is 20 minutes late. Two girls come to them saying the school is closed because the building is flooded. The school's principal, Cole, and the police officers find an axe sticking out from the school's statue head. There is a written message on the floor. They made me do it. While walking home from school, Donnie notices Gretchen being bullied by Seth and Ricky. Donnie stops the bullying, and they both walk home. Gretchen moved to town with her mom to escape her violent stepdad. Donnie confides to her that he has been arrested for burning down an abandoned house. He tells her he is now okay. Donnie asks Gretchen out on a date, and she accepts. Donnie goes to his next therapy session. Dr. Thurman puts him under hypnosis. He is talking about Gretchen. Dr. Thurman tries to change the subjects, but Donnie continues to talk about Gretchen and other girls he finds attractive, like Christina Applegate. Dr. Thurman ends the hypnosis. At school, the police instruct the class to write down on the board, "They made me do it," so they can match the handwriting with the damage. Donnie writes the sentence on the board, which makes him suspicious of the police and the principal. In the school bathroom, Seth accuses Donnie of spreading the rumors that he is the one who flooded the school. Later, Donnie is with his friends in a field. They are shooting the bottles. All of a sudden, they notice the old lady Eddie almost ran over. Her nickname is Grandma Death, because she is always standing in the middle of the road and checking her mailbox. That evening, the school hosts an emergency meeting about the flood. Mrs. Kitty Farmer, the gym teacher, links the event with the book The Destructors. She claims the novel encouraged the violent act, and it shouldn't be taught in school. At the same time, Donnie and Frank are in the bathroom. Frank promises Donnie no one will know what he did. Donnie tries to face Frank, but some kind of force field stops him from Frank. Donnie wants to know why Frank led him to flood the school, and Frank answers they are in danger. Donnie asks him where he came from. Frank questions him if he believes in time travel. Samantha enters the bathroom and ends the conversation. On October 10th, Donnie asks his science teacher, Dr. Kenneth Monatoff, about time travel. The teacher gives Donnie a book, The Philosophy of Time Travel, to read. Donnie recognizes the author's name, Roberta Sparrow. She is the Grandma Death. In his therapy session, Donnie talks about everything that happened to him. He concludes that Frank wants him to talk to Roberta. He says to Dr. Thurman that Roberta said every living being dies alone. Donnie is watching football with his family. He notices a bubble rising from his father and sister, ordering further action. He sees a bubble rising from his chest. The bubble orders him to go to his parents' bedroom. He finds a gun there and takes it. 1 week later, Donnie and Gretchen are talking about time travel. Donnie tries to kiss Gretchen, but she avoids the kiss. She wants the kiss to be something special. Eddie and Rose visit Dr. Thurman to discuss Donnie. Dr. Thurman tells them that Donnie is detached from reality and is afraid of the world. She tells them about Frank. All the signs suggest Donnie suffers from hallucinations and paranoid schizophrenia. A couple of days later, Jim Cunningham hosts a school gathering that Mrs. Farmer organized. Jim tells a story about the protagonist named Frank. After the story, students ask Jim questions. Donnie finds his answers ridiculous and starts lecturing Jim. The adults are shocked by Donnie's statements, but his classmates praise him. After the school gathering, Donnie rants about Jim's falsity to Gretchen. He gives her Roberta's book and tells her he is seeing bizarre things. They decide to give Roberta a visit. Roberta is not home, so they check her mailbox. They notice Roberta at the terrace, staring at them. Donnie hears Frank's voice, instructing him to send Roberta a letter. The next morning in school, Mrs. Farmer demands on lecturing the teachers and the students' morality. Dr. Monatoff and Donnie get into a discussion about philosophy. When Donnie mentions God, the teachers stop the discussion. Mrs. Pomeroy decides to confiscate the copies of The Destructors from the students. On his way home, Donnie finds Jim's wallet on the street. He finds out where he lives. Donnie and Gretchen have a science presentation together. Seth and Rick start to make inappropriate comments about Gretchen's stepfather. She runs out of the school. Donnie follows her and comforts her. She kisses him in passion. That night, Donnie and Gretchen go to the movies. During the movie, Gretchen falls asleep. Donnie starts talking to Frank. Frank reveals his face. He is a young man with an injured eye. His father and grandfather were also named Frank. The movie starts to show Donnie a portal that leads to the sky. Donnie leaves the cinema and starts planning. Donnie decides to burn down Jim's house. He returns to the cinema where Gretchen is still sleeping. In the morning, Donnie confides in his father about his sanity. Eddie encourages him to always speak his mind, no matter what the people say. Donnie is feeling better after talking to his father. Firefighters extinguished the fire in Jim's house. They found juvenile obscene content in his home, and now he's arrested. On October 24th, Mrs. Pomeroy is fired, without knowing why. In her last class, Mrs. Pomeroy decides to use the rabbits from Watership Down as a metaphor for the human condition and existence. Donnie disagrees with her metaphor, stating that rabbits are incapable of complex emotion. Mrs. Farmer is convinced Jim is innocent and wants to testify to defend him. She asks Rose for a favor to chaperone her school dance group to California. That afternoon, Rose finds in Donnie's room an upsetting sketch. She tells Donnie she will chaperone Samantha's school dance group to California. Donnie and Elizabeth will be alone in the house because Eddie is in New York. Donnie asks her what it feels like to have him for a son, and she answers, "It is wonderful." Donnie goes to another therapy session where under hypnosis he confesses to Dr. Thurman his crimes and that Frank made him do them. He says that the world will end. She stops the hypnosis and tells Donnie that his medications are a placebo and he can stop taking them. On October 29th, Elizabeth tells Donnie she is accepted to Harvard. They will throw a Halloween party to celebrate. Gretchen arrives at the party upset because her mother is missing. Donnie and Gretchen are in his room where she tells him that her stepfather is responsible for her mother missing. They spend a passionate evening and return to the party. At the same time, Elizabeth is looking for someone named Frank. Donnie starts seeing the bubble coming from his chest again. The bubble leads him to the fridge. There is a note saying that Frank went to buy some beer. The bubble starts showing Donnie some disturbing visions. He takes Gretchen, Sean, and Ronald away from the party. They go to Roberta's house. Inside the house, Seth and Rick ambush them. They start a fight. A car is approaching and Seth and Rick escape. Roberta is again in the middle of the road. The car turns and hits Gretchen. Two boys step out of the car, and Frank with them. Frank is now just a teenager. Donnie is in grief and ends Frank's life with a gun. Everyone leaves. Roberta approaches Donnie. She received his letter and tells him that the storm is coming, so he must go. Donnie carries Gretchen's body back to his house. He takes his parents' car and notices a black vortex over his house. He drives to a ridge that overlooks the town. He starts to laugh because everything is hopeless. Donnie watches the vortex getting bigger and bigger. He looks at Gretchen's face and remembers the events of the last 28 days. The events start to replay in his mind. He remembers the letter he wrote to Roberta where he stated his worries that the time travel book is real, and despite the world ending, he wants to be happy. Donnie is in his bedroom. He is laughing because he gets the do-over. It is October 2nd again, and he gets a second chance to save Gretchen. He decides to wait in bed for the jet engine to crush him. In the morning, Gretchen is passing by Donnie's house as his body is carried away. In this reality, Gretchen never meets Donnie. She shyly waves to Rose, but they don't remember each other in the new timeline.